I'll get there. Slow go.
You need the light on one? You want some level?
Oh, I don't really care. No, that's fine. I'm going to ask for a bit more juice in the fallback here, if that's okay. Yeah, that'll be good. Let me start by addressing this foot a little more. Worst place ever to break your leg or break your foot is as a guest at a Pentecostal church during their annual revival. They all thought the Methodist minister had just caught the Spirit. Sadly, I broke my foot. tell you a bit about the area that I'm from and where it is I actually am. I live and work in the greater St. Louis metropolitan area with a church that's just about a half mile away from the Mississippi River. So any of the heretics in my church just get thrown right in the river. We never see them again. They end up somewhere in New Orleans, I think, if they float all the way over. Just kidding. But I'm just entering my 5th year as the pastor of Nameoki United Methodist Church. It's a great place to be. And when I get home, I'm looking forward to going home. And it's not because I'm leaving Australia again, but on the 8th of July, I've got a new church moving into my building. They're coming to share some space with us. We have an African-American, full-on, slaying in the aisles revival church coming to use our church. And gosh, I'm excited. I've told them that I'm going to be coming to services. And it's not because I'm there to check up on them. I just want to experience what they have to offer and to worship with them as well. So Spirit of Life Fellowship Church is moving on in on the 8th of July. And we're just looking forward to that particular group being a part of us at Nameoki. There are 3 congregations currently at Nameoki. We have a Saturday evening service as well. And then 2 Sunday morning services. The 8:15 service is kind of like the Frozen Chosen service. And it's a bit like it for me too. I don't get up well in the morning, so when I get to 8:15, I'm not quite sure if I've preached once I'm done. By the time we get to 10:30, I'm usually awake enough. But that's where I am. As I said, it's right across the river from St. Louis itself. And if you know anything about St. Louis, they're mad about their sports team. And the big sports team in St. Louis is the St. Louis Cardinals. It's a baseball team. I can be at the ballpark from my manse in 15 minutes on a good day. So that literally means I'm just across the river from the centre of the city itself. A great place to serve and to witness as I'm entering into that 5th year. Not sure if I'll get a 6th, but we'll just have to see.
Condemned I stand.
So I worked myself a little hard on last weekend. It was a busy time before I got on the plane on Sunday afternoon to come back here to Australia. So every year in the church that I serve, we are called together as pastors and lay people to gather for an annual conference. It sounds about as boring as you could probably imagine. But there are some fun things about annual conference as well. Now, it's a pretty big group of churches that I work with. There's 836 churches in about 3/4 of Illinois that make up the diocese or the synod or what we call the annual conference that I'm in. And once a year the bishop calls us together for a 3-day meeting. Joy. Except they hold the meeting almost 3 hours away from my house. So I drove up and sat through the meeting on Thursday. Thursday night I drove back home again. Friday I had a funeral in the morning. Friday afternoon I had a wedding rehearsal. And Saturday morning I had to drive back to annual conference because the bishop had called the week before. And when you see bishop flashing up on your cell phone, you either know you've been fired or he wants you to do something. And the bishop had called me a couple of weeks before to say, Mike, can you sing at this year's ordination service? So I drove back up there on Saturday morning. I sang. And then I had a 2 o'clock wedding I had to drive back to do that afternoon, and then 4 o'clock church, and then 8:15 church, and 10:30 church, and then on the plane. That was a busy weekend. The plane was my respite from everything else. But Bishop Beard, who is my bishop where I live and work, had asked me to sing a very particular song for this year's ordination service. So this is kind of interesting because a week ago I was sitting in an auditorium with 3,000 people, and this evening I'm here in Victor Harbor with 30. And God is in both places. But this is the particular song that the bishop had asked me to sing this year. I hope it blesses you as it blessed folks last week.
Before you spoke the word, just grace. Before my cry was heard, just grace.
been at my current church as the pastor. I'm the 12th senior pastor for this particular church. Prior to me, every pastor appointed by the bishop had been white, middle-aged and male. And when I was appointed as pastor number 12, I also fit those three categories, except when I opened my mouth, people went, hang on a minute, he's not from around these parts of Illinois. And in order to kind of, and I think this is just God with a sense of humour, in order to kind of smile even broader, a year after I was appointed, a new assistant pastor was sent to help me in the work at Nameoki, and she was an African American lady. So God is having some fun with Nameoki at present. One of the things that one of the practices I have as a pastor is that if anyone ever comes to ask me, can I do X, Y, Z, my answer is always yes, unless there's a really good reason to say no. And so I'd been there a year when my friend Linda walked into my office one day and said, Mike, I have a great idea. She said, I want to make superhero capes for kids. And I said, tell me more. She said, I want to make superhero capes for kids in hospital. I want to make superhero capes for kids that are grieving. I want to make superhero capes for kids that have devastating illness diagnosis. I just want to make superhero capes for kids. And I want you go your cotton picking hardest, but don't give me a sewing machine because I have no idea what I'm doing. So a couple of weeks later, Linda came back into my office with a superhero cape. It was a fairly large one. It was obviously for a girl, at least it was pale blue with a big pink love heart on it. Oh, it's a cape! Kind of jump out the window and be Superman or something. But that was the day that Kids' Capes of Courage was born at Nameoki Church. Linda left my office that day, and no sooner had she walked out than I received a phone call from a colleague in the United Kingdom. My colleague's name is Ashley. Ashley was the pastor of the largest Methodist church in the UK. He's just taken another appointment as the dean of one of the seminaries in the United Kingdom. But Ashley called me on this particular day to say that one of the families from his church had just been in a devastating motor vehicle accident in Florida. And it had left their 15-year-old daughter in a coma, struggling to survive. Will you go down there? So the very next morning I got on board a plane at St. Louis and I flew down to Orlando in Florida, and I grabbed that cape off my desk and took it with me. When I found my way to Wudinna Children's Hospital in Orlando, I found myself in the intensive care unit on the 3rd floor, and when I walked into that room and saw this little girl lying on the bed, something within me just sank. This was not just a little girl fighting for life. This was a little girl hanging on, but for a tiny thin thread. They had scanned her brain. She had been in the part of the car that had taken the most of the impact from a semi-truck. And they had scanned her brain and had delivered the devastating news to her family that her brain had split in half and that there was no hope whatsoever that she would live again. That's a pretty devastating thing to be told as a parent. I'd never met this family before. I'd preached in the church that they attend. They knew who I was by sight, but I'd never actually met them before. And I remember how far my heart fell that particular day. I can't still fathom how far the hearts of these parents have fallen. To know that and to be told that their daughter would never wake up. Megan remained at the Arnold Palmer Children's Hospital for many weeks. There was no change in her condition whatsoever. Those few days that I was there, I discovered that Megan had been preparing to be baptised at the church that she attended back in England, but hadn't quite got there to the end of the confirmation and baptism process yet. And so I concocted a little plan. I Skyped her pastor from England on my iPad. I got the hospital chaplain and a pastor that I'd met in the hallway just a little while before, and we gathered around Megan's bed. with some other members of the hospital staff and her parents. And there, as she lay in a coma, it was one of the deepest privileges for me in terms of the ministerial life that I've been called to baptise her. But she was in a bad way. She remained, as I said, for several more weeks until it was decided that she was at least stable enough to be airlifted from Orlando back to the United Kingdom. That required an air ambulance, fully set out, ready for surgery at any moment kind of jet, and that doesn't come too cheaply. So if you ever visit anywhere, get travel insurance. Sometimes it's that important. So Megan was taken back to England, and she was checked into the Royal Stoke Hospital in the centre of the country, where she laid for many more weeks. The same tests were done, the same diagnosis were given. This little girl was never going to wake up again. Whilst this was going on, one of my friends who attends the same church had been baking. And if you're a baker, you know that sometimes when you have dough in front of you, you need to knead flour into that dough. And Ruth had spread flour across her kitchen bench. And she stood looking at that flour for a moment. And she took her finger, and instead of throwing the dough into the middle of the flour, she took her finger and she began to write words in the flour. And what she wrote in the flour on her bench that day were two words that come out of the scriptures. Talitha Kum. Talitha Kum means, little girl, wake up. The words that Jesus had used over a little girl who was dead. That was amazing to see. Ruth had taken a picture of that and put it up on Facebook. And then over the next several days, she'd taken many pictures of writing those two words in many different places around where she lived. Talitha Kum. That really stuck with me, and that image has remained with me. Little girl, wake up.
Frightened whispering over you to leave the prayed for something so hard, knowing that all of the evidence points to the opposite of what you're praying for. He was a little girl that the doctors had said would never live again. He was a little girl that had received the waters of baptism as she lay in a coma with that cape I had taken with me draped across the end of the bed. He was a little girl whom doctors in 2 countries had said would never live again. Several months after arriving back in England, Megan's mum, sitting at her bedside one day, decided to order a pizza. As you do, I guess, when you're in an intensive care unit. And as she was talking to the person taking her pizza order on the phone, she looked at Megan and said, "What do you want on your pizza, Megan?" And Megan's eyes leapt open and she said, "Tuna and sweet corn." Firstly, that's the most disgusting combination you could ever imagine on a pizza. Secondly, that was her favourite pizza from before she had the accident. I don't know how God managed to knit a brain that had been severed back into one piece. I can't explain how that happened or why that happened. I don't know whether it was because of the fervent prayers of those here or if it was always God's plan to knit that brain back in together. These things I can't explain except to say, little girl, wake up. Megan got stronger and was eventually transferred to Tadsworth Children's Rehabilitation Hospital on the edge of London. And here's where the circle kind of gets to complete itself a little. We began posting capes to Megan for all the new girls that were arriving on her ward. Megan became the giver of the kids' capes of courage made by a group of women at a church in Granite City near St. Louis in America, pastored by a weird guy from Australia. Go figure, and put all those pieces together. I can't explain why it was that Megan one day woke up. But if you've been a person that has prayed for people for a long time, what happens when we don't see that kind of miracle? Because there was a time in my life that I didn't see the miracle of a child waking up. And that was the time that my own child was also in an accident and subsequently passed away. I was on the other side of the world. I was following a sense of call that I believed had been placed upon myself and my family. And then what happens? The little boy did not wake up. How do we process those times where we don't see Megan's miracle?
Little baby, time to slow down. Little baby, listen for the sound of the Father. Hear my song, 'cause I will sing to you the whole night long. Little baby, time to stretch and grow. Little baby, take a chance and just let go of my hands, and you will stand. One small step, my baby, if you can. Footsteps in the dark, footprints on my heart. Another night of dreaming till the morning catches up, and echo at my door of life and love and war. But these footsteps in the dark, they're leaving footprints on my heart. Little baby, time
My congregation folks were kidnapped and murdered, leaving 4 preteen and teenage kids. How do you make sense of messes like that? How do you, even as a person of faith, process and comprehend it when children die and folks are told that you have cancer and it's the end? I'm not sure we were ever meant for things like this. But I think there's a clue as to what it is that leaves us a step back from the point of insanity when these things go on in our world. And that clue, I think, is found in the Old Testament, in one of the Psalms. This particular psalm has been popular the last 120 years at funerals, but before that it wasn't a funeral psalm. It wasn't something often read at a graveside. I bet if I started the beginning of this psalm, you would be able to finish it for me. The psalm begins, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." And as the psalmist begins to unfold the psalmist's heart, as David begins to pour himself out into this piece of music, into this song in the book of Psalms, David comes to a line where he writes, "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me." What I think is astounding about that line is that at that point David had no real concept or idea that in 1,000 years after this particular piece of poetry was written, that there would come someone that would fulfill that line in the psalm. "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me." The one that was to come was given that name, Emmanuel, meaning you are with me. Jesus is in the Old Testament before Jesus ever walked around the place. "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death." I've walked with some people in some pretty hard places, difficult valleys. I've walked my own difficult valley. I'm walking a valley at present with 4 kids who have lost a mum. I'm walking a valley with a family whose mother I buried this Friday week ago. Someone who was told you have cancer. Fought it to the end, looked death in the eye and laughed at death. But death finally claimed my friend Joyce just a few days ago. Since I've been here, I've had another member of my church pass away, or another person attached to my church pass away. How do you process that stuff? Because we weren't made for this. But we have a promise that says, when I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, God is with me. I like to think you can't fall any further in life than the valley of the shadow of death. But as you walk in those shadows, the ground on which you walk is the very presence of God. In the shadows, I think we truly discover the presence of God. And it is God that walks with us in the shadows as the point and person and presence of light. And we have another promise that says the light shines in the darkness, but the darkness cannot overcome the light. So when we walk in these places, whether or not these stories we have end like Megan's story, with a joyous leap onto the top of a hillside at the very end with a hallelujah, he is risen, or whether those stories simply cause us to slow to a crawl, wondering how it is we'll ever make it through the next hour, let alone the next day, let alone the next week. We have a promise that says when you walk in those places, you need fear no evil, for I am with you. I have a funny thing about death. not everyone agrees with how I talk about it, but let me throw this out. I think we weren't ever created to experience death. We were created to live in the garden with God. But one day, death found the back entryway into the garden. And in a moment, suddenly the world was gripped in this thing called death. But death was never God's intention for you and I. His intention was that we would be created to live and play in the garden. Death had to be, in some way, defeated and destroyed and ripped apart to make a way for us to be in the garden again. So for my friend Joyce that I buried a few days ago, for Demita who was kidnapped and killed earlier this year, for all those that have gone before us, I have this feeling that for those people of faith, we never actually experience death, because we know that death, even our own death, has already been defeated by one. So what we know is what John calls life, and life more abundant, or life everlasting. Jesus says in John 10:10, I have come, it is evil that comes to kill and to steal and destroy, but I have come that you would know life, and life more abundant. When you bring those two halves together, there's no mention of the word death. In fact, Jesus does away with that at the beginning of that little paragraph in Scripture. It is evil, it is the devil, it is Satan, it is whatever that is, that presence of darkness that comes to kill and steal and destroy. Death gets to be put in that category. But I have come, said Jesus, for something different. That you would have life, and life more abundant. That's a good thought to have, but sometimes it's not always easy to see. In fact, sometimes we begin to play blame games against ourselves for the difficult valleys that we've walked in. We walk in the valley of the shadow of death, and we remain fearful of what evil can do to us, when our promise is do not fear. In fact, in the Bible that phrase is there some 360 plus times. Do not fear, for I am with you. And if I'm honest, when I walked in the valley of the shadows myself, I played the blame game. I shook my fist at God. I wanted to scream into the darkness, and did. And so I kind of dealt with some of that in the way that I work things out for myself, and I work things out like David did. I write them down, I turn them into songs, and that kind of helps me to process. So this is one such song, and you may get into the middle of this song and think this is a really dark song. So the exit line is at the very end, and I hope that when you hear that line, it'll suddenly make sense.
Deep despair of the valley, waiting for light to invade. Cold is the dark of this sadness, hope that is fading away.
spoken and sung about together. And it's a story from the state that I now call home, Illinois. Back in the 1800s, there was a man who lived in Chicago with his son and 5 daughters and his wife. His name was George and his wife's name was Anna. They lived together with their 6 children. When the Great Fire broke out in Chicago in the 1800s, it swept through his business that he had built. And not only did it burn down that which he had worked so hard to build, it killed, in the Great Fire of Chicago, his only son. And so this man, George, and his wife, Anna, were left with their 5 daughters and no business. It was around about that time that the great evangelist D.L. Moody was holding revival meetings in the United Kingdom. And Moody sent a telegram to George and to Anna inviting them to leave Chicago and come to London to be about God's work there. So they decided that's indeed what they would do, but something in Chicago meant that George had to stay there a little while longer than his wife and daughters. And so he sent his wife and daughters on ahead to England, and it was George's plan that he would join them in a couple of weeks. As that boat was crossing the Atlantic, it came close to the United Kingdom, a little wooden sailing ship. But coming in the other direction towards that sailing ship was a big iron frigate. And the captain on the frigate didn't see the little wooden boat and directed his iron boat straight through the centre of that ship. The ship sank like a stone. Anna, George's wife, was pulled from the water. All 5 remaining daughters drowned. This is a difficult story. This truly is a valley of the shadow of death kind of story. When Anna reached London, she sent a telegram to George. It's a 2-word telegram. And that telegram simply said, "Saved, alone." I can't imagine receiving that kind of telegram. It was hard enough for me processing the death of 1 child, let alone 6 children in a very short space of time. George got aboard the next ship that he could and made his own way across the Atlantic. And when that ship neared the place where his daughters had drowned just a couple of weeks before, the captain slowed the ship. And it was announced that this is where the sister ship of this one had gone down. George found himself outside, looking into the water, knowing that the waters that surrounded the boat that he was on in this very moment had claimed the lives of his 5 remaining children. I think there was a bit of David in George that day. I wonder if there's a bit of him in me sometimes. Because instead of screaming or kicking the railing or doing something untoward like that, he simply took out a pencil and a piece of paper.
When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrow like sea
found our own selves in our own valley of the shadows of death. We've not yet found